Good to have you on CGTN.
Yeah.
Well, since the founding of the People's Republic of China 70 years ago, especially over the past 40 years of reform and opening up, hundreds of millions of Chinese people have been lifted out of poverty, and that has been a miracle in China. So how do you feel about your trip in China, and what's your impression about the country, and what's your assessment of China's development and change?
My impression is one of amazement. It is always changing. And having been in both Shanghai and Beijing before, look, it is very different even from just a few years ago. It keeps developing, there is more infrastructure, and you can feel the prosperity. I agree with what you have said, and in fact I would go further. The last 70 years in China has seen the most remarkable economic transformation in history. It has taken more people out of poverty than ever before. What's also impressive is, in addition to dealing with these challenges, and I acknowledge there's still more to do economically and infrastructurally, the government is moving in other areas like pollution, modern day issues that I think the Chinese expect and want to see progress on. So all in all, it's a very amazing story. And it's one I think that New Zealanders relate to, because we have been direct beneficiaries of it as well, as our trade has grown and we have been able to share in that growing prosperity of China.
What do you think of the political parties should contribute to the country's development, and how do you evaluate the role of the Communist Party of China in leading the country's development?
Well, the discussion I've had with members of both the CPC and the government is that political parties are incredibly important to the running of a country. And as I say, that transformation has been so dramatic. New Zealand has enjoyed a very strong relationship with the CPC, and we have felt the privilege of being able to have many firsts with your party and with your country, whether it's been as a developed country acknowledging a free market status, a first free trade agreement, accession to the World Bank, joining up to the Asia Investment Bank, or indeed joining up to the Belt and Road Initiative. These things have been very good between our countries, and of course have been driven by the CPC.
You've been talking a lot about the cooperation between China and New Zealand. What's your assessment of the bilateral relations, and what do you think are the specific measures for the two countries to strengthen cooperation under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative?
I think it's been very strong. As I say, if you look at it, New Zealand has been a direct beneficiary of what has happened in China. Our trade in about a decade has gone from just a handful of billions of dollars in New Zealand dollars to over 30 billion. China is now our biggest trading partner by none. Mostly, but not entirely, there's tourism and other areas. This is in food. And we take very seriously creating high quality food for China. This has been very exciting for New Zealand. I think in a sense we got a first mover advantage in China. We quickly recognised the power of what was happening here. I think in fact the most powerful area of cooperation between our two countries is people to people. It's when people visit, it's when tourists come, it's when students learn in both of our countries. These people become mutual ambassadors for our countries and increase that well-being and understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And as your name is Bridges, and the bridge is also a very important channel to connect us together and to bond people together.
One of your ministers has called me Mr. Chow.
Mr. Chow.
And I think this is because we have talked a lot about some 250,000 Chinese living in New Zealand, making that their home. And of course we've met over here many New Zealanders in Shanghai and Beijing and other places who are doing well in China as well.
Yeah, exactly. So yourself is a vivid example and a good ambassador connecting us together.
And can I say President Xi Jinping is also a wonderful ambassador for our countries. Now, over the tenure of the last government, he took a very personal interest in New Zealand. I was very struck by something he said, something like this, I'm not quoting exactly, at a meeting I was at with him and our former Prime Minister John Key. You know, New Zealand is a cherry. You are a large watermelon, but we are both delicious. And although different in sizes and shapes, we can make a great contribution to each other.
Yeah, each cuisine has its own unique characteristics. Exactly. So when we combine together, that will make very delicious dishes for the world as well. Exactly. But recently, let's talk about another topic, because you know that we've seen these global instability and uncertainty has been on the rise. And some countries pursue unilateralism and protectionism, while the challenges to world peace and stability and development has been increasing. So what's your assessment of the current international situation?
Right now, we do see protectionism and the rise of that. We do see unilateralism. And we agree, I think, in many ways, and share an interest with China on this. As a small country, you know, that cherry, as we have talked about, we will never do well out of a might is right approach, where the biggest, the strongest always win. We stand to gain and do well out of multilateralism, out of the rule of law, out of mutual cooperation. And this is our approach. A very powerful example of this right now is the WTO, of which China and of course New Zealand is a member of. Now we have a situation where come December, certainly early next year, the WTO will not be able to function because the US is not allowing new judges to be appointed. This is not right and is not in New Zealand's interests. In a world that is interdependent, that needs multilateralism, that needs understanding, and that needs, as Winston Churchill I think said, jaw, not war.
Yeah, indeed. And you mean that safeguarding multilateralism and free world trading system is quite significant. So you know that President Xi Jinping has also proposed the concept of building the community with a shared future for mankind. So what's your interpretation of that concept?
When I hear that, it speaks to me of a world that is interdependent. One of your very senior leaders said to me something along the lines of, when another country is doing well, the right approach is to think, how can we relate and benefit from that? That has certainly been the experience to date of China and New Zealand. The well-being and rising up of China has been to New Zealand's benefit, and vice versa, I think, is also true. As I say, there is a different view that one side needs to win and another side loses, and I don't subscribe to that view. I think the world is interdependent.
What's your opinion about the current illegal and the very violent incidents here in Hong Kong that have gone against the one country, two systems policy?
This has served not perfectly, and we believe reform is needed, but New Zealand's interests very well. We understand and accept China's sovereignty in Hong Kong. We simply want to see that the peaceful resolution of what is happening in Hong Kong. And I think the recent step around the extradition bill to remove that has been very positive.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bridges, and we're looking forward to have more cooperation with the parties in New Zealand.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much. You speak excellent Chinese as well.